Welcome to Camera Tech Podcast, episode 107, the podcast where we talk about photography, videography, and anything that's got anything to do with any of that, really. So, episode 107, we are still miles apart.
We are. It's glorious. Absolutely glorious. You are still without a nationality, aren't you?
Yeah, I am still fighting for my passport. That's right.
Yeah. How long before you think it will all be done?
It's a good question. It could be any day, really.
Oh God.
It's been rather complicated and hard wearing,
Imagine if you didn't have someone to stay with. Good God. This would be a very expensive not entering it in your calendar mistake.
Yeah, I mean, it's just it's a bit of a nightmare, but I think we're sort of getting somewhere. I mean, incidentally, the funny part is that what's delaying it is that the local authority here needs to have some kind of declaration from the embassy in London to say that I didn't already apply for a passport there, because I could have applied for two different passports in two different places and then sold one in the back. Yeah. So it makes sense, but of course, and so they haven't been lucky in getting in touch with anybody there, which is the whole reason as to why I'm here in the first place.
So who are they getting in touch with? The UK government or
the German embassy
in London?
The German embassy.
Fantastic.
In London, yeah.
That's so fantastic.
That's great.
Their system's not connected in any way.
Well, you would have thought that they have some diplomatic ways in which they, channels in which they get, but no, they have to send emails and send a fax, apparently.
Fax and a letter.
Who remembers those?
Yeah, I very remember them. They are. So I never had a fax machine though.
No, I think my parents used to have a fax machine back in the day, in the office. Wow. Yeah, so that's what I'm waiting for. So it's super frustrating. But hey.
It'll be over soon, one way or the other.
Yeah, I mean, it's...
You'll have to do national service again.
Well, funnily enough, they gave me an emergency... So, I mean, this is the thing that I didn't really quite understand. So we went at a meeting this morning with the local authority, and they basically said, well, they've made several attempts. They haven't heard anything back, and, they're going to try again tomorrow, blah, blah, blah. And then they gave us an emergency number to call, which I called. And eventually I got through to somebody. And, they eventually said, okay, well, we're going to get in touch with the department directly. And then I got called back this afternoon to see whether I've heard anything yet. And I'm like, well, no, I haven't, because I haven't. So at least there's some dialogue happening now, So that's the important part. Of course, I mean, I'd rather be at home by now, but it hasn't.
Well, it's difficult, isn't it? Because it's nice to have a few days away, but not under these circumstances.
No, not really. It's what it's like. It's it's difficult because it has an impact.
I was going to say have you got a cutoff date in your head? Like, if I don't have it by Friday this week, I need to go. Well, you can't get home, can you?
I can't. But this is exactly the point. I can't get home without the passport.
So you could be. There's a chance you could be there for another couple of weeks, right? Unlikely.
It's unlikely. Yeah, it's unlikely. I mean, I do think it's probably we're talking days now, but not not weeks. But it's frustrating because it has an impact on everyone. It has an impact on my wife and the kids and everything else. So it's rather difficult. And I'd rather be at home. But yeah, as nice as it is, being back here and the weather being nice and everything else. But I'd much rather be at home for sure.
Definitely.
Yeah. So it's
Let's not talk about any more gloom. all we all know is that if you switch on next week and you still see us in the format that we're in, we're not even going to talk about it. you'll just know what's going on.
Yeah. Talk about gloom. So if you probably won't see this, and of course you wouldn't know if you're listening to the audio version of this. But if you are watching on YouTube, you'd possibly see a slightly green hue on my side of the zoom window, and that's because of the way I have to light myself here improvisationally. Unless Nick does his magic and color corrects all that, of course.
Make it more green. Yeah.
Make it more green, yeah. So I look like I'm in the Matrix rather than in Germany.
No, it's like
oh man.
Yeah, no, it's a tricky one to correct, believe it or not. But I'm still quite impressed with the what's it called? Webcam. That's the word I'm looking for. The webcam on the latest MacBooks. Pretty good.
Yeah, and if you compare that to my MacBook, of course, which is like a 10-year-old MacBook, you'll actually see the difference.
Absolutely.
I think this is a 720.
Yeah, so this will be 1080, but as we know, then none of that's made equal.
Sure,
but I'm quite impressed. The zoom, obviously, I'm seeing the direct quality here. What's getting recorded is slightly worse than what it actually is, because it just puts it all together and does its compression and conversion and all that.
The funny thing is, when I look at both of us on the Zoom call, I can see you sitting in the UK. Your image looks much crisper and much clearer than what I'm seeing of myself.
Rather than the potato that you're filming yourself on.
I know, yeah. I was like Mr. Fuzzy.
Yeah.
You don't need to worry about the skin smoothing thing in Zoom, the built-in skin smoothing, because 720 does it for you. It's already built in.
It's true. This is true.
Why would you need that? Just get a low quality webcam. Yeah. Talking about cameras, actually, there was one thing that I did this week, though, that was actually really fun. Because over the weekend, we went to a place called Motor World in Stuttgart. And it's right next to the Mercedes factory. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And it's a huge, huge area that I believe used to be US barracks at some point in the past. And it's like a huge, huge area. And it's all dedicated to cars. So high-end cars, and like there's the exhibitions, of all sorts of really awesome cars. I mean, everything from Ferraris to, there was a Maybach there, some classic 1920s Mercedes coupes and stuff like that. It was really, really, really nice. This, McLaren have a shop there, and it's just basically all the expensive brands are there: Lamborghini, Bentley, Ferrari, whatever. Yeah, but they also have, this is really cool, they have these glass, like 2-story glass cages, and you walk past and it looks like an exhibition, right? So let's say there'd be, for argument's sake, a Lamborghini in there, right? And then there's like a little sign with a photo and gives you all the data, like the horsepower and the this and that and whatever, right? It's just like an exhibition sort of thing. But these things are not actually exhibition cages. They are private storage cages that you can hire. And if you don't have anywhere to put your luxury car, or your sports car, or your classic car, or whatever, then you can hire one of those, and you drive in, and then basically either they stay on the ground floor or they sort of move them up. And then your car turns into part of the exhibition. But actually, for you, it's a way to store your car, which I thought was awesome. Nice. What a great idea! And there's some killer cars in there. Unbelievable, yeah. So
you need a bit of cash to have a car like that you can just put somewhere that you're not going to touch.
Yeah, and I mean, one or two of them were empty. Because there's then a sign and they say like, "Well, it's on on tour at the moment" or something like that. Or there's one. Like a souped up VW camper van that's like been mega restored and souped up and whatever. And that's been out, obviously. but yeah, it really, you would have loved it. I mean, you would have absolutely loved that place.
Oh, I bet.
And it's all like, they have, as part of the exhibition, they have some really like classic gas pumps as well.
Oh, nice.
And the whole
I like
thing.
all that.
Yeah, it's great. Yeah, you would have absolutely loved it. The whole thing is kind of set up like in that kind of ambience,
Yeah. You'd like so very close to me there's a place called Brooklands Museum, and right next to that is also so Brooklands have like they've got Concorde there,
Mhm.
They've got and then a whole host of cars and planes and things like that. And then right next door to that is Mercedes-Benz World.
Ooh,
So it's
okay.
got all the Mercedes related
Hmm.
stuff, and they've got a track there as well that you can take cars out on, and they do like wet tracks and all that to teach you how to
Yeah.
drive. I like that. Very, very cool. You'd really enjoy that. And the other thing you'd like that I've been to the last couple of years that they've been on is the Festival of Speed and the Goodwood Revival down
Oh yeah.
at Goodwood, and that's just endless cars,
Yeah.
endless, and anything car related. Absolutely fantastic. Planes too.
Yeah. So, let's bring that back to photography. So, one of the reasons we went there actually was because I was talking with my mum's partner. We're talking about cars, and he's really into cars and everything. And so, we had a conversation about the car photography that we did over the last, a couple of years or something. And so he suggested, well, why don't we go there and you can take some pictures of cars there? And I went, that sounds great. It's a great idea, And of course, I never travel without this little Fuji X100. And I kind of thought, well, you know what? Actually, this is probably all I need. And rather than doing this with light painting that we normally do, I kind of thought, well, I wonder if I can get something that looks equally awesome with this, 24 megapixel digital camera. And so I thought about a particular editing technique that I could utilize with that. And the photos really, I think, came out really well. And because I've obviously prepared that, I will send them over to you, and then you can play them in. And then I kind of thought, well, this is a really interesting editing technique that we can talk about, because I'm sure some of our listeners and viewers will be interested in how that works. And it's totally different from what we normally do, but it has some really interesting aspects to it. And so the way it works is you essentially turn your image into a black and white image to start with. But not, you can do that in a number of different ways. I mean, you could desaturate
I know this
it.
technique. I know exactly what you're going to say, and it's so worth talking about.
Right.
It's such a cool way of doing it.
So essentially, for the viewers and the listeners, what you do is you turn your image into a black and white image. And again, there are a number of different ways you could do it, but you don't use any of the standard methods. So, for instance, in Lightroom, and this will work in Lightroom and in Photoshop, especially in the raw editor in Photoshop.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, you could, in theory, just simply switch it to black and white, but you don't want to do that. You could just simply fully desaturate it with a saturation slider. You also don't want to do that. What you actually want to do is go down into the hue and saturation slider bit. And you simply take all the sliders, all the reds, all the oranges, all the blues and aquas, the magentas and everything, and the greens and the blues and whatever. And you move all of them to the left. So you basically desaturate your image and turn it to a black and white image that way. What you do next is you simply now treat that image as a black and white image to start with. So you edit the contrast, and you set you add some crispness to it, and you basically hone in the exposure and the whites and the blacks and everything else. Crisp it up, give it some punch. Until you get to the point where it really looks like a really good black and white image. That's the first thing you do. Once you've done that, you go back to the HSL, or the hue and saturation slider bit, and you basically bring each color back individually, and you decide which one of those colors are really relevant for your image. So it might be, for example, that you have a blue sky in the background. So you bring some of the blue back. You might bring it back to a fraction of what it was originally. You might want to change the hue of it, or you might decide to leave it out completely and sort of desaturate the sky. Or you might have some, I don't know, foliage in the background. So you might bring the greens back, but or not. It might be distracting. What it helps you to do is to basically filter out any kind of color distractions that take away from the main subject of the photo, which in this case is a car. So depending on what the main color scheme is in the car. So for example, one image, for instance, is a Ford Mustang. The Mustang was mainly black, but it also had like a yellow racing stripe. It's kind of yellow, orangey, type of thing. So the main colors in this image were basically orange, but in the background there was a Ferrari which was red. So by taking the reds out, or by desaturating the reds quite dramatically, you'd really take away the distraction of the object in the background that was bright red. And so really what it does is it helps you to not only create like a really cool look, but it just allows you to actually take out distractions, by color only. Because as we know, if color can very, very quickly draw your eye away from the main subject, and so it allows you to basically address those sort of things individually. What I found in this particular scenario, where you don't really have any control over the background, and you can't really move things around, and because it's essentially a museum, basically, it really it allows you to really hone the whole thing in. And it was interesting. I got some really, really awesome results that I like a lot in that way. And then to finish the whole thing off, you can basically go into the what you call it in Lightroom, the color correction panel. And the color grading panel even. And you then basically add a little bit of blue in the shadows if you want, or a little bit of some oranges in the highlights if that's what you want to do, or add some greens or reds in the shadows, even depending on what the main subject is. With the McLaren, for instance, there's an interesting thing, because on that particular photo, there's obviously the back of the car in the foreground, but then there's the McLaren logo in the background, which has a lot of red in it, because that's how the logo is. And some of that red also sort of reflected on the actual car. And there it really made sense to push a little bit of the reds back into the shadows. And so forth. And so what you can do then is you can create an overall look that really ties all the images together. So not only are you able to really hone in each individual image and really make sure you draw the attention to the main subject, but you can, across a series of photos, you can also create a look across the whole thing. And it's actually a really quick way of editing, and of getting some really cool results. It's not.
It actually is. It is very, very quick, provided you're comfortable editing black and white to begin with, and you've got an idea of how to go about that, because that does really make a difference.
Sure.
And it's tricky not to overthink it too much. But what I particularly love about this technique is that once just for argument's sake, you might only bring up half of the various colors in saturation. You might leave the other half down, just give or take, something like that. So you've kind of got a half color, half black and white image, but provided you've selected the right kind of colors, your brain, even though your brain fills in color where it's not there.
True.
When you look at it, it does fill it in a little bit, so it doesn't feel like it's half black and white, half color, and all these sections are still in black and white. It doesn't feel that way. It just feels moody.
And it also allows you to actually turn an image that otherwise is really sort of horribly lit, because in those kind of places, you got to remember, you've got artificial lighting, tungsten lighting, or whatever ceiling lights is. And actually in this particular space, there was really a complete mix of natural light, because there were big windows or big window areas, and like sort of half a glass roof and whatever. But there were also loads and loads of kind of tungsten lights. And so it was really like an ugly yellow, orangey, greeny tone. It's really not very, very pleasant at all. And with this method, it really allows you to really to filter that out almost without any difficulty at all. And you can bring some of that ambience back to a very low degree if you so desire, just to kind of bind the main subject into the setting a little bit, but it really allows to really get rid of all that nasty yellowliness of those lights.
And assuming what your main subject is, it doesn't have too much orange or yellow in it, you can get rid of all of that anyway. And provided there's no foliage, and if you're indoors, hopefully the greens you're going to drop those out anyway. You're all right. It's difficult with those kind of lightings. Just out of interest, how did you on this occasion specifically, how did you go about setting your white balance for that scenario? Or didn't you bother?
It was super simple. Yeah, it was auto white balance actually, because I knew I was going to change it anyway. I was, obviously I was shooting in RAW, so I knew I could fix that later. That would have been difficult because it was, depending on where you went in the building, there's always a different mix of artificial light and daylight, and even in terms of ISO settings, you had to be relatively flexible. Some places were better than others, and of course, as is always is the case with cars, it really depends on the color of the car. If you're trying to shoot a black car in a relatively dark spot, you have an exposure issue. And if you're trying to shoot something that's very highly reflective, for example, then you also have an exposure issue. The one thing that in a situation like that, I mean, if you are, thinking of taking photos at exhibitions or in museums or something like that, the one thing to bear in mind is, and this is really something that's virtually impossible to control, is the sort of light spills, the reflections you get on the paintwork on the car. They can be really quite ugly depending on what the surroundings are like. And I mean, you either spend a lot of time in Photoshop or you just suck it up. They're like little ugly, particularly ugly things you can get rid of relatively easily and stuff. But for an image like that, I think you're going to have to call it good at some point. When you have control over the set and you have control of the lighting, then you can control those reflections to a much greater extent. And that's, you would do that with softboxes and with the way you light things and, scrims and all the rest of it. But yeah, in this particular case, it is what it is. Yeah, but, I was actually really, really pleased with what I managed to come home with, given that I literally just took a fixed lens, Fuji X100F with no frills. I mean, no zoom lens or anything. It was really super simple. And I looked like a total tourist as well, which is brilliant.
You always look like a tourist.
Yeah, I mean, it was fun outing.
No, that's cool. That's very, very cool. Yeah, I love that technique. And it's you don't see it all that much, has to be said. It's really cool.
Yeah, it was just something, I was racking my brain. I was kind of thinking, okay, how can I come up with something that, allows me to shoot something with minimal effort, basically. Because of course, because you can't, you obviously can't, you can't bring any lights. They would, using a speed light or something would have been absolutely frowned upon, obviously there. Yeah. You can't really do that. And there are other people milling around as well. It's not, you don't have to place it yourself. And you also want to move through it. So, because there is so much to see and so many really cool cars to shoot that, you don't want to spend too much time on each thing.
Yeah, absolutely.
And of course, what it does do is it forces you to think of perspective much more, and composition and so on. So when you know that you're not really going to have to worry too much about, about colors and stuff like that. So yeah, it was good fun.
Cool. Love it.
Yeah. So if you're listening to this or if you're watching this, and you have examples of a similar technique you've tried that before, let us know. Or in fact, if you like to shoot cars and motorcycles and anything that moves really, then by all means, send us your images. You can do that, on Instagram, or you can send it through on Facebook or via email or whatever. Then it'd be fantastic to see, because when you're in a pinch, you can't really do anything else, like me at the moment. Then you can find yourself something to keep yourself occupied. And that was a really good thing.
Yeah, absolutely. What else has been going on in your world?
Not very much, but I have been reading the latest photography news, actually. And the one thing that you'll love. So apparently the Nikon Z9 is now the market leader in pro bodies with 57% of market share of pro mirrorless bodies over $5,000.
Right. Okay. So there's like two of those,
which is remarkable, since that camera is actually never in stock.
Right. So, how are these numbers calculated? Pre-orders, I guess.
So this is basically for US units sales. So this is not pre-orders, actual sales for full frame mirrorless bodies, so over £5,000 in the first 3 months of 2022. So that's basically what it is. It's, this is also, this is based on, actually, this is the little caveat, this is based on a Nikon press release as well. Just saying that. I'm not disputing that the numbers are not correct, but there might very well be. And I know, and we all know, that the Z9 has been doing fantastically well.
Absolutely.
For Nikon in terms of sales and pre-orders. Nikon actually does say that they basically shipping these out the second they come in from the factory. So they're trying to push out as many as they possibly can. But for a variety of reasons, not least the current, chip crisis and the lack of part availability and all that kind of stuff, they are obviously having a problem. Just like, to be fair, just like any other manufacturer as well, Canon are experiencing the same difficulties, I'm sure all the others are too. But, nevertheless, in a sense, great news for Nikon, because, they've been on the back foot for quite some time, and
absolutely,
Z9 seems to have turned their fortunes around.
Well, no, it's great, and I wonder if there are existing Nikon users which are upgrading, or whether that's people coming back. I'd love to know. I don't think that's tricky to know. But so
we've had a few Z9 users that have left comments on some of our previous YouTube videos before, and it's really interesting. Again, it'd be super awesome. If you have some hands-on experience with the Z9, let us know. Put something in the comments. Always curious, absolutely. As I said, I haven't actually managed to get my paws onto one of those, but I'm sure it won't be long.
Yeah, that's it. I hope Nikon's if they're getting them out the door immediately, I hope their quality control is better than Canon's.
What's been happening? What's been happening with your Canons?
I have quality issues on my Canon. Oh, okay. So it's sat right next to me in a minute. I've got a box ready to package it up. It's right here. I can even show you the problem I've got.
Right.
So I got this when it was released. Maybe within, just the first month or something like that, whatever it was. Anyway. And ever since then, little reports come out of the earlier ones, and apparently kind of later batches were better, but still not 100%. Where those of you who are not looking at the video right now, this is the Canon C70, and it has a flip screen, which is great. Still works great. Still works fine. But, and I don't know if this is going to show on here properly, but it is. Can you see that?
It's got some give in it.
It's got a lot of give in it, and there's a nasty noise when it gets to a certain point. I don't know if you'll hear that. Maybe not. And when you flip it over, again, you may not see it, but can you see how lopsided that is?
Oh, yeah.
That's a cool shot. Look at the reflection in the lens. Hey, it's two of me. So I've read a lot of people who have had it fixed for free, as rightly so, by Canon, and the fix is fantastic. It's taken anywhere between a week and 2 weeks to get it done, which I think is reasonable, actually. I don't think that's too bad, considering. And so I know I haven't got much on for the next couple of weeks that I'm going to need this for. So I thought, right, if I'm going to do it, now is the time to go and do it. Because I'm on holiday for like several days of this. So, right, fine, let's get it away. And so I'm going to send that off tomorrow. I hope. Well, actually, I've got to arrange the collection. So next couple of days anyway. And hopefully that fix will be all sorted. That's great. I've had more issues this week as well.
More
so obviously, I'll keep you posted as to how that fix goes and how that progresses. So this is what happens when so the worst time for this to happen, I should say, is when you're on a job. And so I was on a job the other day doing an additional day, sort of just some exterior shots and some walkthrough style shots and things like that. And I get to the first place, because there's multiple locations, get to the first location and set up the Ronin RS2. I think that's what it's called, whichever one that is. And get it all balanced, all fine, all good. Turn it on, nothing. Motors don't start at all. Turn it off, turn it back up, unplug, take the grip off, which has the battery and back in, all that. Started it back on. Nothing. Connected via the app to check what's going on, try and do a balance test, all that kind of, see if I can force it into doing something, reset settings and all of that. Try to update the firmware, that wouldn't happen. Couldn't do it. Read online quickly that if you power it off, take the battery out and do it something like that, like 10 times, got it to work. Wasn't having it. Was not having it. So by this point, like 25 minutes had passed, and this was a tight scheduled day as it was. And I had to just, I've got to cut my losses. I just need to go and do it handheld, and that's that.
Yeah.
And I'll just have to do my best at doing it handheld. And so that's what I did. And that's what I did for the rest of the day. Worked out fine. I've finally got around to turning it back on today.
Was that with the C70 or the R6? That
was the C70.
Okay.
It wasn't a weight thing. It's more than capable of handling that weight. And I did it tried it again today with the C70 on it. So you need to turn them on balanced. Otherwise it goes all over the place. Fine. Absolutely no problems. Updated the firmware at that point as well, while I could, just to make sure there wasn't a weird little bug in the last one. And that updated fine and no problems. How bizarre.
Was there any explanation for that? Or?
Nope.
No.
I haven't done any more research since, but I will, and see if I can find out what's going on.
I mean, again, this is something we could ask our listeners. If you are currently using the Ronin S2, is it?
RS2?
RS2?
It's the one with the little red stripe around it, carbon fiber thing.
Let's just
I think it's the RS2. That's what I want to go with. Dum 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 dum.
Get a quick look.
I was sure you're going to have it by that point.
Yeah, that does.
Is it the RS2? It is the RS2, right?
Yeah. I mean, it looks like it's difficult.
Yeah, I'm sure it will be. I'm pretty confident it's the RS2.
All right, cool. Let's go with that. So if you are using the DJI Ronin RS2, then and you're experiencing or you have experienced similar problems, you get in touch. Is that something that happens repeatedly? Did you find a fix, or was it one-off? Or have you used that gimbal for a while and you've never experienced any problems with it, which would then basically mean it's that's just your gimbal.
Brilliant.
Sorry.
Brilliant. Yeah, it's the RS2. Yeah, so that was difficult. That was quite a frustrating situation to be in, and you've got to think on your feet and just go with what's going to work. You've got to make the best of it, right? And so I went ahead and I turned on the. This doesn't have full-on stabilization in the body, but it does have digital stabilization built in as well. So I went ahead and turned that on and decided to use that along with the stabilization that would be on the lens at the same time. And just did my best. And thankfully, most of it was shot in 120. So kind of got away with it, thankfully.
So that's, what's the tip for, for getting super smooth, imagery on that without a gimbal?
Well, it's a couple of things that you can do. One, and this goes for anything that you're doing really anyway, is you want to make sure you've got two hands on the camera, almost without exception. If you've got one hand, trust me, you're not getting steady footage at all. You want to make sure you get two hands, solid grip, ideally on the side and underneath as well. And the crucial things that now, it depends on how you're viewing, where your screen is. It can make it tricky depending on what flip screen you've got and whether you can only turn it that way and up a little bit. So, but what you want to have it as close to your body as you can, and you want your elbows in against your body. Okay, and you want to grip it tight, but not too tight, because that can give you it can make it just as bad if you're gripping it too tight, because you start shaking just from holding something so tightly. Okay.
So
you want to still be lax, solid, and you want to move as slowly as you can. Even if you're moving quickly, if ordinarily you'd go like that, don't do that. Just move your whole body with it. That's tip one. Second tip is if you need to walk, well, if you're standing still doing a movement, fine. Just keep your legs apart, solid, grip on the floor. Don't be on tiptoes or on one foot or just casually standing. Stand there. The best way to describe it is stand there like you mean it. Like you're meant to be at that spot. So then second tip would be, if you're doing any kind of movement shot, you need to, who described it like that? I can't remember who described it in a very cool way. Very funny. I'll remember in a minute. It was one of our guests. But you want to walk like you're floating. Okay. You look ridiculous, but it's all right. No one cares. You're the one filming. You're the one getting a cracking shot. That's it. So you want your knees bent.
Okay.
Don't walk normally. Knees bent. I generally go with being on my tiptoes if I can, but that's not always possible because that can still give you a little judder. So the alternative is, you want to try this out and practice, is you want to go heel to toe with your knees bent, like in a rocking motion if you can. So it's a very smooth. You're never going to get it just solidly straight forward. Don't expect that, but just expect it to be smooth in and out if it's going to be. And that's fine. It's going to look good. It will be clear that it's not on a gimbal because it's not on a gimbal. You're not going to get a gimbal shot handheld. It's not going to happen. If you're filming in 120 and you're going to play it back at 120 and you're doing any kind of movement, then you're only going to be using at most a couple of seconds worth of that footage.
Yeah.
So it's still just as important to be, on your feet properly, moving properly, arms in, because even just using that fraction of a second of what it would have been if you film for 2 seconds, or let's say you film for 5 seconds, right? Do you know how much footage that is when it's at 120?
For sure, yeah.
My God, it goes on forever. But if you can manage to do that for 5 seconds, you're going to have a whole load to choose from, depending on what you're shooting and what the shot actually is, right? So there are a couple of the main tips I would give.
So basically, if you're shooting handheld and you're trying to get to always shoot either at 120 or above, or even 60 frames per second actually does already give you a markedly improved result with that.
Yeah. And just by saying 60, it's assuming your final project isn't going to be in 60 for some reason. So that's then having it slowed down to 25 or 24, depending on where you are.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There you go.
There you go.
You've heard it all.
And then if you do that in combination with a little bit of software stabilization, you're winning.
Cool. Well, that was that was
Oh, there's one more.
interesting.
There is one more tip I can give. Actually, it will help. Is if depending on the camera you're using, it's not really practical to have a strap around the C70. But if you're using a regular mirrorless camera that you're doing video on, stick a strap around it. Keep it short so that it hangs down again around, upper chest height, and then keep it again, 2 hands on, elbows in, tight, but pull on the strap on your neck as well. And that will give you even more it gives you a third point of sort of contact with the camera. So it'll be that little bit extra stable as well. There you go.
There you go. Stabilization tips. Heard it here first.
Sometimes.
Cool. I mean, there was another kind of property shoot. On that one. How did you get along with the traffic situation?
It didn't. It was awful.
Yeah.
It was actually awful, to the point where in a couple of the locations, there were 4 locations in total. 2 of the locations were on such busy streets that there were vans just constantly on the street. It's not just vans driving past, they are parked in front of the building. Now, ordinarily, you'd go, okay, fine, I can wait them out. If the driver's there, I can ask them to move, all of that good stuff. They're all usually very accommodating. Not always, but often. I was in the very, very fortunate position that they were driverless. No one around that would be in those vans either that could own them. And they never came back. Oh, no. And I waited as long as I could before I knew I just had to move on. And they never came back. So in the meantime, I got what I could without getting those in there. You may as well don't say, oh, I really want that shot. That's fine. You might not get it. Go and do something else while you're waiting.
Yeah. That's a particularly tricky location. And, I've shot the same thing a few weeks ago. And I had to come back 3 times in total, actually, to eventually, sort of get the shots that I wanted. Because it is the way the layout is, there's basically a lay-by, if you want, right in front of the building. And unfortunately, anybody and their dog starts stopping right in front of the building. And I remember the last time I went to get some of the final shots, it was a constant, could you please move on? Blah, blah.
Yeah. Well, and the other one's just behind Oxford Street. So that's just super busy all the time. And I can deal with the traffic. I can find a space to get to miss the traffic and get the shot. But if there's something just blocking your view, the main view of the build, there's only so much you can do.
Yeah, I actually did a reshoot on one of those buildings. I did the main exterior shot in, I want to say, late February, early March, something like that. And when I came back with the images, and there's some trees in front of the building, and it just, it looked pretty dead, having some dead trees in front of it. So I decided, for this particular one, I'm just gonna have to come back when there's some foliage on there, and that's what it really, really paid off. It looks so much better.
And to top it off, at this one at the first location I was at, which was having problems with vans, you'd think, okay, maybe we can even just go a lot further back and get just a very wide shot, because it's a lovely area that it's in. It's really not everything looks good. And there was a fair on because it's in a big square, and there's a big sort of small but park in the middle of it all, right? And the roads go around it, and this whole thing was filled with a fair. So you couldn't even get that. Madness.
There's in fact, there was one of the buildings. I remember I was there to shoot the exterior, and it was a Thursday, and Thursday apparently is what they call rubbish day here in the UK. So basically, they had tons of trash bags outside the building, and I thought, well, A, I'm not going to move these trash bags because there's quite lots of them, and B, I don't really want to come back to reshoot this because everything was perfect on that day. The weather was perfect, the light was great, So I thought, well, I can apply all of my creative Photoshop skills and get rid of them afterwards. And actually, that was all right. Yeah, I think I got
Nice.
fairly decent results. It took a long time though. I mean, it took probably an hour or something of cloning things out. In the end, and
Yeah,
it's a pain in the neck.
that's it. Got to do what you got to do.
Yeah. So yeah, interesting thing. Cool. What else? What else been happening this week?
That's kind of it from a video photo world from me. Last week or so.
Oh, there's another fun story I came across. So apparently, get this, McDonald's and Wendy's have been sued over the size of their burgers in their advertising imagery.
Amazing.
Because apparently their burgers are depicted 15% larger in their advertising photography than they are in real life.
Who has worked that out?
Exactly. That goes back, I think Burger King had to deal with a similar court case before. But yeah, so that was something that made me chuckle. I've always thought that these bloody burgers are smaller than they are on the photo.
Oh, it's a falling down moment right coming up, isn't there?
So yeah, so they're being sued in New York. So McDonald's and Wendy's are being sued by a New York man who claims that advertisements for the burgers look much bigger than they actually are. And it's a proposed class action lawsuit.
All right.
Yeah, it's a dude called Justin Chiumenti. And like many other people, he was disappointed after buying a Big Mac from McDonald's and the bourbon bacon cheeseburger he bought from Wendy's. I'm liking the sound of that.
Yeah, me too.
Bourbon bacon cheeseburger.
Aren't they opening Wendy's in the UK?
I'm pretty sure there are Wendy's. Yeah, I'm pretty sure.
Oh, there are a couple, are there? Yeah.
There used to be at least two. I remember in central London. Well, one was just outside of King's Cross Tube Station. Okay. That at some point disappeared. But I'm pretty sure they're back somewhere. They're not as common over here as they are in the US.
No. Total side note, a relevant side note. There's a Five Guys opening out around the corner from me.
What?
Yeah. Guess what we're eating from now on when we podcast at mine?
Well, that's, yeah.
That'll be my weekly treat.
Absolutely. It has to be before 8 o'clock, though, because otherwise, keto and stuff.
Oh, let's end it here. Yeah, we're done.
Only kidding. Yeah, but I mean, this dude, Chiumenti, get this, he filed a lawsuit for $50 million.
$1 billion.
So $50 million, incidentally, it's the same insane amount of money that Johnny Depp is suing Amber Heard over. Brilliant. If you are following this whole shebang.
Not anymore.
Well, whilst I'm here in Germany,
nothing to do.
Yeah, not much to do, and mainly, So yeah, are you an Amber fan, or are you in the Amber camp, or are you Justice for Johnny? Even.
Oh, Johnny Depp all over. Yeah. Yeah. Does anyone like Amber Heard? Don't think so.
I thought this the other day. It's difficult because no matter where you look on social media or anywhere, it's firmly in support of Johnny Depp.
Yeah.
And it seems to me there must be somebody somewhere who supports Amber Heard. Although,
no,
having watched a substantial part of the whole trial debacle, I have to say she's not very likable, from a personal perspective.
There's probably a little bit of truth on both sides, let's say. There's probably a little bit of something the other way too.
For sure.
Not denying that, but I think she's the cool. Yeah. I can't talk celebrity gossip. Doesn't sit right with me. I don't care enough.
Yeah. It's one of these things where, typically when you hear about like a domestic violence type of case or scenario, you're sort of automatically primed to think it's the guy's fault, or the guy is the perpetrator, basically, and the woman is the victim. And although you're right, I mean, absolutely, I think it's become really quite clear that it's a little bit happening on both sides in this particular case. But no doubt, there's evidence that she definitely wasn't innocent in the whole thing.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. And you can kind of see it just by listening to Johnny Depp when he's on the stand and he's testifying. He's so slow, and it takes so much time to get his sentences out and everything. It's easy to see how he would be it's easy to see how Amber Heard would be on the upper hand, when they're arguing. Do you know what I mean? I mean, I don't think he would get two words in edgeways.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Are we saying he wasn't actually acting in Pirates of the Caribbean, but that is just him?
What they say, there's always a lot of themselves in every role they play.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, that's funny.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, by the time this comes out, the whole court case might be over. Actually, I'm not sure. I don't actually know how long this is going on for. No idea. But it's interesting to actually watch the whole the whole proceedings and to realize what it's like in real life, as opposed to the movie and the TV versions we see of those. Of those kind of goings on. It's by far not as interesting and thrilling as most courtroom dramas will have you believe.
That's quite right. Quite right.
It's like I'm pretty glad I didn't go for a career in law, because that would have been extremely boring.
Boring, yeah. You're very boring.
So yeah. Anyway, Ed, on that bombshell.
What a bombshell.
What a bombshell. We have come to the end of episode 107 of the Camera Strike podcast. Hopefully we're back in our usual surroundings by next week, but who knows? There might be a repeat of this sort of scenario. But if you are listening to the audio version of this podcast, you'll be reminded that you can not only listen to our sultry voices, but see our lovely, beautiful faces in full Technicolor over on YouTube. And whilst you're there, make sure you hit the bell, subscribe to the channel, because that would really help us out. And do all that good stuff. Leave a comment and let us know you're listening or watching. Because YouTube, podcast listeners are listeners. They're not readers. Just to put that out there.
Oh, no matter, be upset with you.
No matter what they say, they don't read anything. They listen. Hence, they're listeners. Dun dun dun.
Controversial.
I know, controversy right here on the Camera Strike podcast. Yeah, so, Peter and Dave. Just saying. Anyway, with that, that being said, we'll be back next Thursday. See you then.
See you later.